Well, the bass player's plunking and the drummer's kicking in, and I'm just trying to find a place to fit in. The front man's up front, and that's where he ought to be. But if you listen real close, you know you might hear me. I'm playing rhythm guitar. Hey, 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 hey. I'm playing rhythm guitar, and it feels okay. I go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi.
Ben Vaughn's radio show, The Many Moods of Ben Vaughn, is broadcast from Parts Unknown, USA. I guess we'll never know where that is exactly, but we do know Ben grew up in Philly on the New Jersey side of the river. When he was only 6, his uncle gave him a Duane Eddy album. That record would have a profound impact on Ben, who was playing drums in a garage band by the time he was 12. His interest then turned to the guitar. Ben has been recording, performing, touring, and providing scores for films and TV theme songs for years now. He still finds time to host what, in this fan's opinion, is one of the greatest radio shows on the airwaves. He also found time to call in to Frets.
Here we go. I go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. Let's ride.
You're listening to Frets with DJ Faye. No lessons, no technique info. I just talk to people who play guitar. Stay tuned. Ben, thanks for calling in.
Hey, it's great to be here.
I got to ask, are you calling in from Parts Unknown, or are you talking to me in the Relay Shack?
I can't tell you.
I knew I wouldn't get you to break on that.
No.
So, well, for the listeners, we will explain in a little while what the Relay Shack is in a little bit if you don't already know. But Ben, first I want to talk about your early years. You were born in New Jersey and grew up in the Philadelphia area on the Jersey side of the river. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, Camden, New Jersey.
Yeah, and I don't know a whole lot other than I think your dad was like a TV repairman, and mom worked in fashion, or your mom worked in fashion.
Yeah, my dad was a TV. I grew up in Mount Ephraim, New Jersey, which is right next to Camden, and Camden is a city kind of like Newark is to New York City, or maybe Hoboken is. A manufacturing city right across the river. RCA owned most of that city and had probably about, I think 25 buildings, factory buildings. And everyone on both my mom and dad's side worked for RCA at some point. And I grew up, my dad was a TV repairman, and my mom was a retired fashion artist. She gave it up in order to raise a family, which is something that happened a lot back then in the 40s. And she drew the photos. She drew the illustrations for Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
So every Sunday in the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Philadelphia Bulletin, her artwork, it's findable online too. I found it right before she passed away. I found her stuff and showed it to her, and it was really a pretty interesting moment for her to see her artwork after all those years.
Wow, that's great.
But she couldn't understand where it was. She goes, okay, you're showing this to me on a laptop, but where is it? And I said, Mom, I don't know. I actually don't know where it is.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, when you were just 6 years old, your uncle gave you a record, and this wasn't a Mouseketeers record or, something by Alvin and the Chipmunks, but he gave you an album by Duane Eddy.
Yeah. The first album that Duane Eddy put out on RCA, luckily my uncle, who was a rock and roll fanatic, he worked at RCA and brought a copy and gave it to me. For some reason, he thought that this was a good idea, and it completely changed my life. I listened to that thing probably 1,000 times, and this is about a year before the Beatles. So I was a rock and roll fanatic before the Beatles for 1 year,
And my exposure to the Beatles was like, I was kindergarten age, and we would hear it in the car on the way to kindergarten, but wow, that's predates the Beatles.
The Philadelphia area, which is where I grew up, the radio was amazing there, and Cameo Parkway, and all these record labels. So I grew up with the mashed potato and the twist and a lot of doo-wop. Like I heard doo-wop. I don't remember not hearing doo-wop. So a very dance-oriented town, too. So when I first started playing in bands, I was playing drums. And you really got to get the beat right to keep people on the dance floor. They don't invite you back. And it was a great rock and roll environment and soul music and R&B and doo-wop. A great environment to grow up in. It was everywhere on the radio, everywhere you went. Really, really
Wow.
awesome environment.
Well, not too much longer after that. You were still just a kid, but you started playing drums in a garage band. Was that the first instrument you played? Was the drums?
Yeah, I was 12 years old and I played drums. They would let me come out and sing one song, which was Wine, Wine, Wine. You get a nickel, I'll get a dime. We'll go out and buy some wine, drinking wine, which is they thought was amusing for a 12-year-old kid to be singing about getting drunk.
Nice.
But that was my moment in the sun, which led me to want to play guitar and stay out front instead of getting back behind the drums. And besides, you can't really write songs on drums.
Right.
It's kind of hard.
Well, before the switch to guitar, could you play Wipeout?
Oh, yeah. That was one of my main numbers. You had
Nice.
to. You had to play that. You had to play that.
In the early 80s, you put a band together, the Ben Vaughn Combo. I watched a lot of MTV in the early years of that station, and I remember seeing you on there. And you guys recorded a few albums, you toured quite a bit, and someone who took notice was Marshall Crenshaw.
Yes, he did.
He recorded a song of yours, a song that I love the title of, I'm Sorry, But So Is Brenda Lee.
Yeah, that song put me on the map as a writer. Marshall, the first gig I ever did as the Ben Vaughn Combo was just me and a drummer playing at Folk City in 1983, and Marshall was in the audience, and so were a lot of people and that I met and became friends with. And he approached me and said he wanted to write with me. And we tried writing some songs together, but nothing really clicked. And he said, how about if I just record one of your songs? And I said, that works. That definitely works. And he did. And I got a lot of attention for that song. And it's an unusual title. Obviously, it's an unusual title. Like
That's great.
Yeah. When it shows up, you're like, oh, I have to listen to this, I guess.
Lures you in. Yeah, I was wondering if he contacted you directly or if his people got in touch with you, but it sounds like he saw you perform that song.
Yeah, he did.
Well, later on, but still in the 80s, you launched a solo career, and just like the albums by the Combo, your records got really great reviews, and you toured not just in the States, but in Europe. Can you recall any like really great experiences while touring overseas or any strange experiences or any bizarre experiences?
Actually, I have a funny memory about St. Louis, actually playing, let me think of the name of the place. It was a basement club in the college part of town, downstairs. Cicero's, that's it, Cicero's, where above the stage were pipes, water pipes.
Oh, yeah.
And my drummer, Lonesome Bob, a very large man, in order to get himself out from behind the drum kit, because we were crammed in there, he reached up and pulled himself up, and the pipe broke.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So I remember that one. I remember St. Louis.
Loved.
We played in St. Louis quite a bit. We were on tour constantly for about, 4 years. And we played in St. Louis a bunch of times, mostly at Cicero's, but also off Broadway. And there was a Mississippi Nights. Was that a club?
Yes. It's no longer there, but yeah, it was quite a great venue for years. Cicero's, sadly, the old Cicero's is gone. It is, that same space is now the Duck Room, which is part of Blueberry Hill. But yeah, fond memories of many great shows at Cicero's in that dark basement.
I loved it. I love that place.
With the loose pipes.
She said she would never go. She said that she loved me so. She said our love would never die. She said she would never make me cry. But then the north wind blew. But then the north wind blew. Tell me, what am I gonna do now that the north wind blew? She said she would always stay. She said she would never go away. She said I would always have her heart. She said, baby, till death do us part.
Looking to buy a guitar, an amp, pedals? Find great deals on all of these as well as audio and recording gear at reverb.com. You can also sell your gear through Reverb. They have great articles about music gear and bands. And Reverb believes music makes the world a better place. That's why they created Reverb Gives, that provides youth music education programs all over the world with the instruments they need to make music. Link to Reverb through Frets with DJ Faye in the show notes for this episode. We talked earlier about how that Duane Eddy record obviously had a big impact on you, but in addition to recording your own songs, you went on to produce a few records for another rockabilly great from Memphis, Charlie Feathers. No one played or sang quite like Charlie.
No, Charlie was a genius, like truly a musical genius. You know, that word gets thrown around a lot, but Charlie, he saw rockabilly as a living, breathing art form. Progressive rockabilly, I think, is what you would probably call what Charlie did. He saw so many possibilities in a genre that most people thought was very narrow and, you know, didn't have much room for expression. He was so unusual and so musical in a way that was impossible for him to talk about, really. Conversations with Charlie and working with Charlie was very, very interesting. He was very eccentric and a very determined guy. And I am such a huge fan. I'm still finding Charlie Feathers records that I never knew existed. He recorded a lot of stuff that came out on weird little labels over the years. And I'm still amazed when I find something by him I never heard, and I hear where he goes with a song from beginning to end, where he ends up. Amazing, an amazing artist, and working with him was a real thrill.
I'll bet. Yeah, his vocal style was almost like this intentional hiccupy thing or something. It was
unbelievable.
Very interesting. Well, Charlie's songs show up on your radio show occasionally.
Oh yeah, definitely. Charlie Feathers. I can't put a playlist together without thinking whether a Charlie song could be shoved in at somewhere. Yeah. You know, I'm that much of a fan. I love him.
Was it around that same time that you collaborated with the late, great Alex Chilton?
Yeah, I met Alex, I guess it would have been about 1983. A friend of mine introduced me to him, and I was looking for a record producer at the time, and he produced the Cramps, and that was good enough for me. And I gave him a cassette tape, and he very politely received it and said he was going to listen to it, and I just kind of assumed that was never going to happen because he had such a laid-back way of talking that he sounded disinterested.
Wow.
most of the time about everything, you know. And I mistook that. Mistook? Is that a word?
I think so.
Yeah, to believe that he was not interested in my music. And then we had the same booking agent, and we were put on a Midwestern leg of a tour together in 1987. And Alex, at the very first gig, he came up and just started telling me how much he loved that cassette tape and started, you know, citing details from it and everything. And we became good friends, like almost immediately that night. And interesting, you know, this is a guitar kind of show. There's an interesting thing with me and Alex that we were backstage. It was at the Grand Emporium in Kansas City, a club I'm sure no longer exists. And I complimented him on something that he was doing on guitar, and he was confused by what I was complimenting him on. And so he handed me his guitar and asked me to show him what I meant. So I showed him. And from that point on, he thought I knew more about guitar than he did. Which was not true at all, but he couldn't get it out of his head. Like our whole relationship, all the way to the end, when he passed away, he would say, "Well, you would know about that. You're the guitar guy," and I'm like, "No, I'm not," because he was a really advanced guitar player, but he didn't recognize that in himself, and thought I was advanced. It was kind of a humorous riff that we had going back and forth.
I love that. So fast forward to the 90s, you move out to LA. And before long, you were composing music and songs for television shows. And was the first theme song you did the Third Rock from the Sun song?
Yeah. I moved out to LA, out here to California. I'm going to give you that much information about where I am.
Oh, okay.
I am in California. I moved out here in 1995. to score what I thought I was going to do is score independent films and make no money, but I wanted to work and I wanted the reason to write music every day. And I figured the record business, you only need one album a year or one album every year and a half. So not much writing is needed from you. And I wanted to write every day. So I came to California and was being interviewed on a radio show, and a very popular radio show called Morning Becomes Eclectic on KCRW, that all of the music supervisors and directors and film producers, they all listened to it. And when the host asked me why I moved to LA, I said to score films and TV. So if anybody out there has a project, call the station. And the phone rang. And it was the president of Carsey Warner Productions. They had a bunch of TV shows, Cosby and Roseanne and all this stuff. And the woman said, when you're done there, come to this address. We're working on a pilot right now. And from what I heard of your music on the radio, you're our guy. And it was like one of those Cinderella stories. I went to the studio a lot, and they had already decided that I was their guy before I even got there.
That's great.
Yeah. And they told me that what they wanted, what they've been looking for, and they tried a bunch of different composers for Third Rock from the Sun. It's a show about aliens, and it's very over the top. And they said that they had auditioned a lot of composers, but they weren't right because what they were looking for was American rock and roll as if played by aliens. And she said, and we think that's what you're already doing naturally, which I took as a compliment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's weird is I was too weird for the record business, but just perfectly weird for TV, mainstream network TV. That really surprised me.
Well, the theme for that 70s show was a variation of a Big Star song. Did you work with Alex Chilton on the show version of that song?
Yeah, I did. It was great to revive that song. That song should have been a huge hit.
Oh, yeah.
It should have been a hit single back in the 70s. And they were looking for a song for the kids to sing along to in the car because the people who created that 70s show also co-wrote Wayne's World. So that whole Bohemian Rhapsody thing, they did that. That was them.
Right. It's very similar point of view and just the look of the kids singing in the car.
Yeah, and that was what they knew needed to be the beginning of the show, which is a perfect way to start a show about teenagers, right? And they were trying all these, they were considering all these other songs, like 18 by Alice Cooper, Young Americans by Bowie, and there was a music supervisor, a grizzled veteran music supervisor, the guy that has to go try to get the rights to this stuff and negotiate deals. And every song they mentioned, he would say, nope, no way. No, he was like an executioner, He was like, nope, boom, Every song they mentioned, he goes, you'll never get it, too expensive. And finally I said, can it be a song that should have been a hit in the 70s? And they said, yeah, if it's a good song. And one of the writers for Third Rock, he was a Big Star fan, so he ran down to his office and brought back the first album. And I played In the Street for them. I said, what do you think? And they were like, that's it. That's our theme. And
it's perfect.
And the music supervisor, the executioner, said, well, okay, before you fall in love with it, we're not going to be able to get that unless somebody in this room knows the person who wrote it. And I said,
As fate would have it.
Yeah. I raised my hand, and he's like, you're kidding. I said, no, I can call him right now, and I did. I called Alex.
That's great.
And I said, call your publisher and tell them something's happening here, and you need them to move on it. And he did, and a deal was struck, and we were shooting that scene with the kids. I call them kids. The actors.
Right.
3 days later, we were shooting that scene. That's how tight the schedule was.
And then Cheap Trick did a version on the show?
Yeah. We had Cheap Trick redo it. The first season, it was a session singer, a guy named Todd Griffin. And then the idea that Cheap Trick could do a version of it became really attractive. So I got a chance to work with Cheap Trick. That was really funny.
Nice.
They were extremely funny guys and really professional. And I love Cheap Trick. But the thing is that I brought an ashtray in for Bunny Carlos, the drummer, because he was notorious for smoking on stage.
Right.
And he said, oh, I hate to tell you, but I quit.
That's pretty funny. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
try to find my personality or my identity in the music the best I can. And by the fact that I am such a blues advocate, I mean, you know, usually the interpretation turns out a little bit closer to the blues side, you know. But I just love the music, and I'm just so happy that, you know, people still can find some appreciation for what I do.
That's bluesman Larry McRae, a fine guitarist and a fine singer. My talk with Larry is available on Frets. Hope you'll check it out.
Well, I was born in Arkansas. Come up feeding hogs and baling straw.
Well, you did work on some movie scores and soundtracks, quite a few. Psycho Beach Party was one of them.
Yeah, I was working nonstop for, I guess it was about 11 years, my Hollywood time. I was hot, you know, and I accepted everything that was offered to me. I accepted because I couldn't believe what was happening, you know. I couldn't believe I was being offered the work, so I just said yes. And I got into a little bit of a scheduling problem. I was doing 3 shows at one time. That was a bit much, but it was great. I loved it. I learned a lot, and the fantasy of making it in Hollywood, I was able to check that off, you know, the old list. Yeah. It was great.
Well, I just learned something recently that Lauren Ambrose, who's in Psycho Beach Party and who I really loved as a Claire on 6 Feet Under, I'm guessing a lot of people associate Lauren with that role on 6 Feet Under as this neurotic stoner. But in addition to acting, she's a trained opera singer. I didn't realize that until recently.
Oh, yeah. She did gigs around L.A. when we were I saw her perform once back when I was working on Psycho Beach Party, actually. It was before 6 Feet Under. And amazing voice.
Yeah, so when she's not playing Chicklet in Psycho Beach Party, she's on the stage singing.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, you also produced, there's a bunch, but you produced the Swingers soundtrack?
I produced a couple songs for that. Yeah, I produced Big Bad Voodoo Daddy for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Any relation to Vince Vaughn? I'm guessing not.
No, but I sat next to him at the premiere.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And everybody thought we were brothers.
I do want to talk about Rambler 65, and for any of the listeners who aren't familiar with that album, it was recorded entirely in Ben's car. So what led you or possessed you to do an album in your automobile?
Okay, you know, when you're having a midlife crisis, the first sign that you're having one is you think you're not having a midlife crisis. That's my explanation for that album.
Okay.
I was turning 40, and that led me to drag my recording studio out into my car and record an entire album in my car, in my driveway in New Jersey before I moved to California. And it seemed like a great idea at the time, and the record came out great.
I really liked it. Great.
Yeah, it's pretty eccentric. I just wanted to prove it could be done. I was really driven. I needed a challenge at that point in my life, and that was a pretty good challenge.
Yeah. No, when I first became aware of that, I was like, wait a minute, did he really do that? And yeah, it was not, just a concept. He really did that. So
yeah, I'm
a fan.
Yeah, I really did. I really did. It was claustrophobic. There was one moment where I had all the windows closed because I was recording an acoustic guitar with a live mic, and I pushed record and I realized there was a bee in there, and I scrambled to get out, and I knocked everything over, and I dragged I fell out of the car with the acoustic guitar trying to get away, and all the the mic fell over, and
yikes.
It was very real. It's one of those moments where I'm like, well, I know I'm alive right now, because I'm a living, breathing human being, because this adversity is very real, and I got to get out of this car.
Well, I used to go see the Morels and the Skeletons a lot. Again, like smaller clubs in St. Louis, some of which don't exist. There's a handful that still exist, but just love those guys. Fell in love with those guys, and they covered several of your songs. And then Donnie Thompson went on to cover a song on the Park Central Squares album. Did you just know them, or did they contact you, or did you know these guys?
This is a very deep dive kind of story. You ever hear of a band called Brinsley Schwartz?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I love them so much. Niccolo, I'm a
Okay.
big Niccolo fan.
Okay. In the early 70s, I was a Brinsley Schwartz fanatic, right?
Yep, me
And,
too.
and in America, okay, we were the only ones in America that I know of, except there's a third guy, and that's what this story is leading to. I was in a record store in Philadelphia, and the woman behind the counter, I found a Brinsley Schwartz import that I'd never seen before, and I was very excited, and I brought it up, and she goes, "Oh my God, you too?" And I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I have a friend in Washington D.C. who is a Brinsley Schwartz fanatic. You guys got to meet each other. Here's his phone number. Here's his address." And I contacted him. His name is Bruce Rosenstein, and he had a mail order record business down in D.C. called Cross Country. And we started corresponding, and he sent me a cassette tape of the Skeletons, that infamous bar gig with Lloyd singing lead on
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Standell songs and all that stuff. He sent me a cassette of that and said, "You're going to love that," because I was also an NRBQ nut, you know. And
Yep, me too.
So he said, "This is the band. This is the other band that is your favorite band. You just don't know it yet." And he sent me this tape. And I had a job as a paste-up artist. I worked the night shift. And I was allowed to listen to music while I worked. And I listened to that cassette probably 500 times maybe. And then he told me that he was starting a record label called Ambition Records, and he was going to put out a compilation with Donnie's driving guitars on it, and also was going to release a single of the original Symptoms, Double Shot of My Baby's Love. And,
I love that.
And he needed somebody to do the artwork for the 45 sleeve. So I did the artwork for the 45 sleeve of the sax player playing a transmission.
Nice.
And Bruce told me that Lou Whitney really loved that cover and wanted to meet me, and they were going to play in New York City. I think it was in 1981 or 82 at the Peppermint Lounge. And this connects with Eric Ambel because he was at that show too, and Rich Neeson. And I drove to New York. It was the first time I'd ever been on a guest list. It was very exciting. A 2-hour drive. I think it was in February or January, and I was driving a Rambler with no heat. I was wearing a down parka and drinking hot coffee all the way up. And I went and I saw them play, and I couldn't believe how good they were. I just could not believe how good they were. And they were so natural. They dressed just like regular people and came out, and they were friendly, and they were, it was just amazing. I was completely blown away. And I went backstage to introduce myself to Lou. And one of the first things he said was, "What else do you do, besides art?" And I go, "Well, I'm a songwriter." And he goes, "Really? Because we hate writing songs. We're really lazy." And Donnie came over and he's nodding, knowing like, "Yeah, that's true. We are lazy. And so Lou said, "Here's my address. Send me some songs. Send me a cassette." So I drove home that night. I was, ecstatic. I was writing songs. I had no idea if they were any good. I wasn't showing them to anybody. I wasn't playing in any bands at that point. I had pretty much given up on having a music career. And I sent a cassette to Lou, and he calls me a week later and says, "We just worked up 5 of your songs, and the audiences love them. Send more."
Wow.
So every time I wrote a song, I would send it to Lou, and they would learn it. And, they did, 7 or 8 of my songs. And then they came up to New York again in 83. When the Shake and Push album came out, they recorded my song, "The Man Who Has Everything."
Man Who Has Everything.
And they wanted me to come up and sing with them at the gigs that they had lined up. And I did. We played, they played Maxwell's, The Lone Star, all these places. And I would get up and sing. And that's when I met Eric Ambel and Top 10 from the Dictators. And I met Andy Chernoff and, Georgia and Ira,
Oh, yeah. Yola Tango.
Not the Gershwins. The other.
I love
Ira Kaplan and also the A-Bones, Billy Miller and Miriam. I met all those people through the Morels because the Morels were so good and so honest about what they were doing that everybody in New York that loved roots music was completely in love with them because there was no pretense, no wardrobe that went with it, no posing. They were real, and they played that stuff so well. And of course, Donnie Thompson, possibly the greatest guitar player in America, is up there on stage, ripping out these solos as if it doesn't even take any talent or energy. He's just throwing it out there. We were all so blown away. I'm one of the I bow in the direction of Springfield, Missouri every day.
Yeah.
Love that stuff. Love them.
Donnie's solo on your song "Growing a Beard" is just I love that. It's like something from outer space.
Yeah, I didn't write that song actually.
I was thinking you did write that.
No, my friend Dan Marcus wrote that song.
Did you cover it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was on the tape that I sent the Morels.
Oh, okay.
It was a cover. My friend Dan wrote it as a folk song. It was like a folk song, slower. And I heard Blue Suede Shoes right away. I said, this needs to be rearranged and hopped up, and it needs to be shot with some Benzedrine or something,
Yeah.
And I did my version of it, and the Morels went nuts over that. That was the first one they learned, and then they learned my songs after that. But everybody thinks I wrote that song, but I did not.
And here I am. I was one of those guys, and you probably were too when you were a kid, who, just was obsessed with reading all the liner notes on all my albums and tapes and whatever. But I have both versions. I have the version by them, and I have yours. But I guess I'm one of those people that assumed you wrote that. But it's a great song.
Yeah, I'm honored that people would think that. And I am weird enough to have written it, but I didn't. This time it wasn't me.
7 days without love makes 1 week. A man can stand on his own 2 feet. He can't do his job, can't get no sleep. 7 days without love makes 1 week. The first day is
Recorded entirely in his car, that's 7 Days Without Love by the one and only Ben Vaughn from his classic album, Rambler 65. More of my talk with Ben Vaughn after this. Stay tuned.
you're getting tired of being by yourself. 7 days without love makes 1 week. A man can't stand on his own 2 feet.
I like coffee, and I admit I've become a bit of a coffee snob. I drink coffee black because, hey, if you want to load up a cup with cream and sugar and syrups and all that, well, whatever. I want my coffee to be delicious without adding anything to it. I take the time to do pour-overs at home. I grind the beans and use my Chemex. The process is worth the wait, and when I buy beans, I buy coffee from my buddy String Bean Pete, coffee roaster and owner of String Bean Coffee. Pete's goal is to offer the finest beans from around the world. He roasts them passionately in small batches in non-computerized old-school ways to music under a disco ball. Yeah, you heard that right. He's a bit of a kook, but that's why I like him. And I really, really, really like String Bean Coffee. Find out more at stringbeancoffee.com.
Hello, I'm Ben Vaughn, and you're listening to Frets with DJ Faye.
Before we move on, I got to say, you got me thinking, I a few years ago, I know it was pre-lockdown, for years, I still have my vinyl copy of Nervous on the Road by Brinsley Schwartz. And Nick Lowe, he was backed with Los Straitjackets. They played, he had another fairly small club here in St. Louis. And sometimes it feels strange to do it, but I took along with me, I took the album, and I was like, oh man, maybe after the show, corner him on the parking lot or something to see. I would love to have Nick Lowe autograph my copy of Nervous on the Road. And alas, I think he was maybe too tired or whatever. He and the band just, I think, split right after the show, or at least I never found him. But yeah, I was a huge, huge fan of that early pub rock and Brinsley Schwartz and Ducks Deluxe and all that stuff.
Oh, me too. Ducks Deluxe. That was very, I'm very influenced by that. My music, you can probably hear it in there. And like just that kind of rhythm, the way of playing rock and roll with that swing in it, like Brinsley Schwartz and Ducks Deluxe. Just amazing stuff, really,
Yeah.
Really. And Dave Edmunds, I was a nut for that stuff too. Still am.
Me too.
I've been listening to that first Dave Edmunds album, the Rock Pile.
Yeah, so
not
good.
Not the band Rock Pile, but the album Rock Pile.
Right.
And that is a very eccentric album. If you listen to it now and listen to the effects on his voices and the way he mixed it, it's a stranger record. There's a false sense of security because it's like American sounding rock and roll and roots music. But what he does as far as mixing it and engineering it and singing is is weirder than I remembered.
Dave Edmunds is great. I saw him years ago up in Chicago. And that was the one and only time I saw Dave Edmunds, but it was really, really, talk about another fantastic guitar player.
Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Well, long ago, you were a guest commentator on like Fresh Air and I think also on World Cafe. Did that influence you to someday have a radio show of your own, or did that go back farther? Like, did you love like radio when you were much younger than that, or?
Well, I was such a music fanatic from a very young age. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do when I was like 8 years old. You know, I knew it. I had to either be a singer, a songwriter, a guitar player, or a record producer, or a DJ. Or a presenter of music in some way. And I had a little, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, AIWA, AWA.
Yeah.
This was a reel-to-reel tape recorder. I was 8 years old.
Right. Yeah.
Or 9 years old. And it was a really miniature, like the reels were probably 4 inches, I think. And I actually recorded my own radio show. I would play records and talk into the microphone, and I had a whole routine that I did where I rhymed everything, you know, like uptown, downtown, crosstown, underground, putting down a pound of sound, abound around the nation on this radio station. I had this whole thing I would do, which I stole from 2 DJs in Philadelphia. We had great DJs in Philly. They were very, jive-oriented, personalities. The Geeter with the Heater, big influence on me, and High Lit, who was also known as High Ski Rooney McBaldio Zoot. And they played great records, and just their presentation was awesome. And I was, in my head, I was already a radio DJ when I was a kid. It was just a matter of time when I was allowed to be emancipated from my parents and have the life I wanted. I was just seriously waiting until I was allowed to not go to school anymore and pursue, what I wanted to really do.
Well, you've been hosting the Many Moods of Ben Vaughn since like 2018 or something like that?
Actually, before that, it started on WEVL in Memphis. It was only on there, and I was kind of cutting my teeth, trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a DJ, playing a real mixed bag, like a real mixed bag where bossa nova and punk rock and glam rock and country can all live together in one show. So I was local on WEVL in Memphis starting, I don't even know when that was, 2002 maybe or something.
Oh, wow. So that's way back.
And then 2008 is when I went syndicated. And so it's, 2008. Yeah. So I don't know how many years that is. 14? Is that right? I think so.
I think so. I'm not as quick with that as I should be.
That was a pretty good guess.
Well, I guess I was thinking of, it's been available as a podcast since for several years now. And that's when I didn't have access to it because I guess nobody in St. Louis picked it up. But when I did realize, oh, wow, this is available, like more often than not, I listen through, just Apple Podcasts to shows. And I discovered it. I was like, oh my God, I got to go. I went back to the very first episode, at least the very first episode that was available on the podcast, and just would make my way through. Like my morning ritual would be like, get up, put on coffee, and then, listen to podcasts. And many, many, many mornings I would listen to your show, maybe, a couple of them in a row, and then, finish doing the dishes or whatever, and then get in my car to make my commute to work and continue listening. It's such a great show. It's not just saying this for your benefit, but it's all the stuff I want to hear. I think all the genres you play and all the stuff you play is just right up my alley. And there are a few artists I noticed that, listening to your show quite a bit, there are some artists and bands that do seem to get a lot of play, and one of those being a band who I am a huge, huge fan of, and that's the Kinks. I mean, they have so many great songs in their catalog, so there are a lot to choose from, but I don't know, I kind of feel like you've got maybe a little special affinity for the Kinks like I do.
Well, yeah, as a songwriter, I mean, Ray Davies is, if you're not paying attention to him, you should be, because he's like one of the best. I was in Philadelphia a week ago, and I was in a coffee shop, and this guy comes up and goes, "Hey, you're Ben Vaughn, right?" Because this is Philadelphia, right? So,
right.
"Hey, you're Ben Vaughn, right?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Way to go, man. the Kinks, right on. And he walked away. So it's been noted that I love the Kinks.
Yeah.
A lot of people joke about it because I love them so much, and I play the Kinks almost every episode. I fit a Kinks song in. And same thing with Nina Simone. I'm kind of a fanatic for Nina Simone. And Doug Somm,
Doug Somm.
Sir Doug. I'm a huge fan. And also Fred Neil. These are artists who never got played on the radio enough. The Kinks had hits, but their album tracks, even during the underground era back in the late 60s and 70s, I don't remember hearing Kinks songs that much. Hendrix and Iron Butterfly and all that stuff. But the Kinks, they were not considered hip enough for the acid rock crowd.
I guess, yeah.
And so that's a wrong that I felt needed to be righted with the Kinks. I'm a huge fan, and their catalog. I mean, all you got to do is pull out one Kinks record, and almost every track is worth playing on the radio.
Right,
every one of them. Very few clinkers there. Very few.
A lot of early Van Morrison shows up a lot too, which I love. With them, and it's good stuff.
Great stuff. Yeah.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Searing star, deafening heat. You don't know where you found it. Embers fade as your eyes fall shut. You better learn how to keep it.
When playing solo or when playing with her full band, multi-instrumentalist Molly Healy is a looping extraordinaire. She creates a piece of music, loops that piece, then skillfully plays accompaniment on instruments including cello, violin, and guitar. That sound, combined with her classically trained voice, produces atmospheric music, often with full string arrangements performed entirely by Molly, multi-tracking in the studio. She's opened for and played with many bands, and in addition to her solo work, continues to play violin for the Ozark Mountain Daredevils. My talk with Molly Healy, coming soon on Frets. Well, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
Sure. I loved it. It was great.
And I'll be tuning in later today or absolutely in the morning to The Many Moods of Ben Vaughn.
To hear which Kinks song I'm playing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm keeping track.
Yeah. No, this was great. Thanks. It was great to talk to you, too, because the whole St. Louis and Springfield and Morell's connection and Eric Gamble and all that, it was like listening to his interview was really great because it took me back in time because I used to crash at his apartment. In New York City when I was looking for a record deal, and he was so generous with his connections and whatever he had going on. Man, he was just like a very generous, good guy, and it was great to hear him talk about those early years when he met the Morells because it was the same time I did, and it was really nice to listen to it. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
thanks.
And he was so great and had so much. We had so much good stuff that I didn't want to cut much out, so I didn't cut much out. And that was like my decision to I could just turn this into 2 episodes. So that was the very first one that was parts 1 and 2. And I did the same thing with Donnie Thompson just because he was great too. And I think he would have talked all day, which was fine with me. And we had a lot of good stuff with Donnie too.
Donnie Thompson, the greatest guitar player you've never heard of.
I've said that for years, so I was really excited that he called in, and he was a lot of fun. I've talked to him just a handful of times since then, and when we were talking about all the Morells and Skeleton stuff, they did a great Kinks a cover of Party Line, which I have somewhere. I've got a bunch of old Morells stuff that from the early days.
I've never heard that one.
I'll have to send it to you. Yeah, it was a bootleg. I don't know if that was ever issued. I know there was a guy that put out a bunch, like an anthology of really early stuff, but yeah, it was a pretty good quality cover of Party Line by the Kinks.
But if there's anyone in your audience that's not familiar with the Morels or the Skeletons, they're the same band, basically.
Yeah.
And they're great. If you can find anything by them, listen to it. You will love it. They're so good, so good.
Thanks so much, Ben.
Right on. Thanks a lot.
Wayne Fontana was wrong. Wayne Fontana was wrong. Love ain't a game you can play all day long. Even though I love his song, Wayne Fontana was wrong. When you look her in the eye, don't be shy.
Thanks for listening to Frets with DJ Faye. If you like the show, you can follow or subscribe for free at most podcast platforms. Hope you'll join me again next time. Stay tuned.
I could do it as a Philadelphia guy. Hey,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you know what you're listening to there, but you're listening to DJ Faye and his show Frets. It's a podcast. You know, if you know what that is, that's what you're listening to. Thank you. Bye.